I'm delighted to be a PhD student of Agustinus, amongst other things, and I'm looking at how language is used to define streets as spaces, with a particular interest on the practices of urbanism, which I'm very much involved with as well. And I think this event and research, not to mention Matthew's research, has been very instrumental in advancing the understanding of streets as public spaces, instead of just music corridors. But let's not get romantic about this. The majority of us live in streets like this. This is what streets look like in many places, still designed around the car, even when they're heavily populated. So those of us that are involved in trying to transform places need to work extra hard to find effective ways in which to engage about that transformation. My colleagues this morning are talking to people in St George's Market about how to turn Cromwell Square into a square. It's not one at the moment. So we're very privileged to have this opportunity to engage with people in a relationship which Jeremy Till would describe as the expert citizen and the citizen expert, which I think is very helpful. Adam here is an expert in places. You can tell by what he draws. And I have to learn as a so-called expert to think more like a citizen. But what our primary form of communication isn't visual, it's verbal. And therefore language is instrumental in placemaking, and it's something which has been very much overlooked in many regards. And words like street are very helpful because we understand them. It's not a permeable connection or thoroughfare, it's a street, yes. And actually the difference between street and road is something that's starting to garner more attention. But when we think about it, there's a whole rich vocabulary of street types out there which are commonplace. We all use them, we know them, and they have huge potential. So starting to study the distribution of these terms and the use of these terms in street names, which is very interesting and revealing. But of course, we come across these terms on a daily basis through maps, through online mapping, through popular culture, if you watch soap operas. So these are all terms which are very established in our societies and cultures, but we're not engaging with them. However, if you take a look around, this is Windermere in the Four Winds of Belfast. What's happened is these terms have become detached from the spatial design, and you find there's a real issue there with place naming and the use of these spatial types. And there's very little correlation in these places between the spaces and the names and the street types that are assigned to them. However, that hasn't always been the case. And looking in more traditional urban form, you can see a very clear pattern within there. So perhaps it's just something that we've lost. But that also brings us on to the idea that street naming and the use of these terms is far more than just the physical space. It's that perceived space, the conceived space that Le Brevre would talk about, or others such as Soja. So it's much more complex, and I think as designers we are a bit scared of engaging with that complexity, but it's also very rich and exciting. So through my study, I'm looking at how language pervades through cultural geography and participatory urbanism and the concepts of place, space and landscape to understand how we use and utilize language in relation to streets. And it's very exciting because there's a real need to understand the prevalence and distribution, but then also starting to engage with people about what these terms mean to them. How much do people know about these terms? And then very excitingly is, well, how can we operationalize this? How can we start to utilize these commonly held terms with creative intent? Because I think there's great potential for us to understand and engage more effectively using street language to create the better places that we very much need. Thank you.